Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a look at Dawn of War 2, written by Chris Robinson. Now, if you couldn't already tell, this book is based off of the Dawn of War 2 video game. It is considered to be in the same book series as the first Dawn of War omnibus, but it's not necessary to read that book. This one's a standalone. Now, the writer Chris Robinson, he has been involved in the writing of a large multitude of books, and mainly comic books, such as Lock and Key, Axe Cop, and the Book of Secrets. And he has written for a Clockwork Storyboard, Monkey Brain book, and a couple books for the Black Library. So as you can already tell, he's a longtime veteran writer. But unfortunately, and not to bash on comic books, I feel that the fact that he's written so many comic books and that's become like one of his main forms of writing, that it's affected his ability to properly write a novel. What a great writer would do when writing a book is that they will paint a scene for you. When you're reading a book, you could completely visualize what's going on. They explain in detail exactly what you need to know. With words, they will paint the scene. But of course, with comic books, you have the advantage of having the scene already painted for you. And I felt that that really affected his ability to properly write this book, because it felt very amateurish. Now let me explain. Now I'm just going to give you a quick example from the book. Battle Brother Vila was the next to fall. He was taking point as the squad's vanguard formation moved through the dense undergrowth, the shrine still hours distant, when a lictor burst out of the jungle before them and was upon Vila in an eye blink. Vila managed to hit one of the lictor's ventral limbs with the melter gun, searing it off at the joint. But the Tyranid surged onwards with its remaining limbs, and Vila fell beneath it before he had a chance to take another shot. What's a lictor? You see, if you're not already familiar with the Warhammer universe, or at least played Dawn of War 2, you wouldn't know what a lictor is. He doesn't really explain what it looks like. And that happens for a good chunk of the book. There's a sheer lack of description on how a lot of these creatures look like. For the most part, he assumes you already know about the Warhammer universe. If you're new to Warhammer, a lot of this stuff is going to fly over your head. And there's another thing that's been bugging me about this book. Now, I did my research, and it seems there's a little bit of a conflict as to which company the Space Marines in this book are from. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit fanboy geek on you, but try to stick with me on this, okay? You see, with Space Marine chapters, generally they have 10 companies, each comprising of 100 Space Marines. And each company has their own specific purpose. Now, in the Dawn of War 2 video game, it uses the 4th company. All the characters are from the 4th company. Davian Duel, the captain, leads the 4th company. And all the characters from the game are in this book, except in this book, they're the 5th company. Now, I know it may not seem like a big deal. You know, does it really matter that it's 4th or 5th company? It's a little bit of discrepancy from the game. Does it really affect the story? Well, it kind of does. You see, with the Blood Ravens chapter, Blood Ravens being the Space Marine chapter in the book and in the game, have a little bit of a dark history dealing with the 5th company. And it seems that the writer purposely changed the company from 4th to 5th just so they could have this dark history. But ultimately, he doesn't use it. It's just mentioned that they're part of the 5th company, they have this dark history, but he never really utilizes it, and it makes no sense that he changed it. I know, it's a very minor thing, I shouldn't be harping about it, but you know what, that's not the only thing he changes from the game. Now, I understand when adapting one medium into another, you're going to need to be a little bit creative and change things up a little bit just so it can fit in that medium. I already talked about this with the first Dawn of War series. And when you try to make those little creative changes, or even additions to the story, it helps broaden all the characters and the story and the history. But it never happens in this book. There's a little bit of a backstory on the Force Commander, the main character you play in the game. In this book, he's called Aramis, and they give him a little bit of a backstory, which isn't bad. But really, that's where it kind of ends. He doesn't really broaden the universe at all. But you know what, maybe I'll be able to better explain it once I get into the book. So let's talk about the characters. I already mentioned the main character is Aramis. He's the Force Commander from the game. Now in the game, he didn't really have a voice or much of a personality. So Chris Robinson had a chance to just create the character all on his own. And he doesn't really do a bad job. My only real issue with the main character is, in the game, he's made the Force Commander because it's mentioned that he's a great hero that's shown great leadership ability. But in the book, he's made the Force Commander mainly because of the lack of options. The guy never really showed leadership ability. He was just kind of there, they needed a Force Commander, so they made him it. And joining him in the story is Thaddeus, the young sergeant of the Assault Squad, who's also Aramis' best friend in the book. Now, nothing really changed with Thaddeus. In the game, he was a young, brazen sergeant who was a little bit idealistic, and that just transferred over to the book perfectly. And you also have Advitus, the sergeant of the Devastator Squad, the gruff, hot-headed, and generally pretty angry character, the guy who just wanted to blow stuff up. And again, he transferred perfectly well into the book. Now we also have Tarkus, the veteran sergeant of the tactical squad. He was the very stoic, by the books kind of sergeant in the game, and he's also in the book. But in the book, they also gave him more of a advisory role, kind of the wizened sergeant that's there to help Aramis to properly mold him into the force commander he needs to lead the squad. Now let's not forget everybody's favorite scout sergeant, Cyrus. Cyrus leads all the young initiates, the scouts, and he's just as cynical in the book as he is in the game. And then you have Davian Duel, the captain of 5th Company. It's supposed to be 4th. Who ends up getting taken out of action so Aramis could take over. Now that you know the main characters you need to know, let's start talking about the story. Now the Blood Ravens are looking for more initiates. They're going to the recruiting worlds to find some new recruits to help bolster up their numbers. But their recruiting world's under attack by orcs. So they gotta cut their recruiting short. In fact, they cut it so short, they abandoned the planet to the orcs. In the book, they try to explain that they didn't have a choice, but in comparison to all the other Space Marine books I've read, it just makes them seem really cowardly. Okay, not cowardly, but just willing to give up way too easily. Although they don't have a problem trying to take some of the children away for recruits anyway, still leaving the rest of the world to die. But I guess in the book, that's how they roll. Anyway, they're getting reports around the sector that some weird stuff is going on, so they're going planet hopping. In one world in particular, Planet Meridian, has become infested with some Tyranids. Now at first, when the Space Marines are there, they're not sure that it's the Tyranids. In fact, when they're trying to inspect the place, Captain Davian Duel, he's in a warehouse, talking to Aramis when he gets ganked by a Tyranid. He was in a warehouse, and he got ganked by a Tyranid while talking to Aramis. Now, if I remember correctly, in the game, it was in the middle of a giant battle. It kind of went like this. That's a lot less dramatic in the book, wasn't it? But, you know what? There I go again. I'm sorry. The book doesn't have to be exactly like the game. In fact, the book does try to take a lot of battles from the game and try to stuff it in there. So now Aramis is in charge. And then it becomes one of those stories where he's trying to get some of his squad's respect. Characters like Avitus and Cyrus, they're a bit harder to convince that they have to follow this guy, and they're a little bit hesitant. But I'm sure you already heard that kind of story before, and eventually he kind of proves himself. And there's really not much more to say about the book. The book was a very easy read, but that's because it felt very amateurish. There's a huge lack of description throughout the entire book. If you never played the game, or if you're not familiar with the Warhammer universe, you're not going to get a lot of the references. And if you are familiar with the game, there's just a lot of uncomfortable changes he makes in the book. Some very unnecessary changes. I already mentioned the change from 4th Company to 5th Company, but there's also a pretty big change as to what happened to the Governor of Meridian, in which case, if somebody writes a book on Chaos Rising, the expansion sequel to this game, it really is going to affect that story. And I'm positive that Chris Robinson writes some pretty great comics. I did read a few of his stuff, not a lot of it, and the comics are pretty good. I just don't think his work translates well into novels. So if you're new to the Warhammer universe, I'd stay away from this. If you're a big fan of the Dawn of War 2 games, I'd still stay away from this. I like the first Dawn of War series, although I will admit the first series was kind of trickling down as far as quality went. And this book isn't helping. Book punch! And well, that's the way I felt about it. And next week we're going back to the Ultramarines with the chapters due. Now that's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth.